Hi, welcome back to our Equip class on learning how to sew, and this time I want to talk to you about some basic sewing equipment. Now you'll be able to download this as a PDF file. And what I've got here today is the basic stuff you're going to need if you want to do some sewing at home. Most important thing to start with, scissors, dressmaking scissors. Now these I purchased in a pack of 3 from Big W, and they were marked as dressmaking scissors. They tend to be longer than other scissors. And one of the other things is they're flat, so that when you're cutting, it's basically flat. It doesn't lift your material up. When you're doing your sewing, you're definitely going to need some smaller scissors, and these are the 2 different sorts. These are just thread scissors. They come in that pack of 3, but these are one of my favourite as thread cutters. They just push together to cut. And when you're cutting threads after you're sewing, picking up the big scissors becomes really annoying. These are really easy to use. So get yourself a small pair of very sharp scissors. This is something important about your dressmaking scissors. Don't use them to cut paper. It will blunten them. The reason is that paper is essentially made from wood, and when you're really cutting wood fibre, when you're cutting that there, and it will take the nice sharp edge off your dressmaking scissors. You want these nice and sharp, so when you cut, it cuts easily and doesn't tear your fabric or become very hard to cut. Next one on the list there is a tape measure. One of the real important things about sewing is being able to sew accurately, and you will need to measure. Now this tape measure has got both inches and centimetres on it. You'll notice that there's actually 2.5 centimetres to an inch. The inch is the imperial. They still use that in the United States. So we converted to the French metric many years ago. Actually, it was the year I started high school they converted to metric. This is just one that has both on it, and I think everything you virtually buy these days. When I was young, they used to say don't buy cotton ones, they stretch, but you don't buy them these days anyhow. Pins. You need them all the time. Sharp things with a knobbly bit at the end, essentially. Dressmaking pins tend to be a little bit longer than the other ones that you can get, and I like the pins with a knobbly end. They're easier to pick up, you see them better when they fall on the floor, and you can grab them much easier. Don't forget a pin cushion.
Mum,
what
other kinds of pins are there?
Oh yes, there's shorter ones, the little short ones, they're paper pins.
Paper pins?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, you mean the push pins?
Yeah, no, they're not this, and they haven't got a little knobbly bit at the end, and they're a bit shorter, and they're often a lot blunter.
Those are for paper?
This is an essential piece of equipment. It's an unpicker. See, it's got a sharp pointy bit here, and this at the bottom of the curve is actually very sharp. You, when you're learning to sew, will be using these all the time. You use them to unpick your mistakes. When you've been sewing for a long time, you use them all the time. You use them to unpick your mistakes. You'll always do mistakes. They're also great if you've picked up a garment that you want to repurpose, and you want to be able to undo the seams so you can pull out the material and go again. Fabulous pieces of equipment. Keep a sharp one. Needles for hand sewing. Yes, you will need to hand sew. We're learning on a machine, but you will need to do some hand sewing, and often when you start sewing, you'll use a hand sewing needle and a thread to hand sew it before you sew it on the machine. That can help you if you're worried about when you're first going. Now, the sort of needle I like is called crewel, C-R-E-W-E-L. Not the other form of cruel, though it would be cruel to use them inappropriately. They've got a big, long eye, the little hole that you put the thread through. And when you get older and your eyes get worse, it's essential to buy crewel sewing needles. Threads to put on your sewing machine. Yeah, see, it comes like this. There's only one thing I want to say about threads. Get the best quality you can afford. The ones that are cheaper, you get them in there, they're great, but if you put them through the machine, little bits of fluff gets caught in your machine, and it'll drive you crazy. Get the best you can order. Probably polyester ones are probably the better, though. I like cotton coated ones, and generally. So, lots of colours of threads. The other one you want with the thread is the bobbin. That's the bottom piece of the machine. You have a thread that comes at the top, and you have the thread in the bottom, and that's the bobbin. The only other thing important about bobbins is get the one suited for your machine. They are different. They can be rounded, they can be straight, they can be metal, they can have lots of holes, or they can have one hole. Get the one that's suited for your machine. It will give you the best movement on it. Now that's what I've got. We've got on our brochure, which you'll be able to, but I just want to add a couple of little extras in it that you might be interested in. You will need these. They're sewing machine needles. you probably will break a sewing machine needle. You just replace it. If you've had the same sewing machine needle in there for a while, get a fresh one on so they're nice and sharp. Personally, I prefer the one that has the 70 on it. It's a fairly fine one. 80 is the normal, 90 is a bit stronger, and 100 is what you use on denim. I like the 70s, they go sharper through the fabric, but they do break quicker. The other thing is you might find some sewing machine needles that have got glue packaging and they've got ballpoint on. That's what you need to use when you're sewing stretch fabrics. It actually doesn't pierce the thread, it pushes the thread aside when it goes through the fabric, and so that it doesn't break the thread. Now you know what happens if you break the thread on a knitted? You get a run, you get a ladder like you do on your stockings. So use the ball points, and you'll find that if you don't use the ball points you might skip stitches. So sewing machine needles, something your grandma used to have. This is a gorgeous one. I picked it up at a garage sale or something like that, and I love it. It's a nice china one. You can get silver ones, you can get plastic ones. It's a thimble. Put it on your finger when you're doing hand sewing. If you don't, the end of your sewing needle will pierce through your skin and you'll end up with a little hole. The other thing is when it's getting tough to push your needle through, you can use this to give it a good push without it hurting your finger. Thimbles are great things to have. And the other one is what we call tailor's chalk. It's chalk that's very hard chalk, but to write on your fabric. When you buy them, you usually buy 3 or 4 colours, and that accommodates your dark fabrics. Use a white thread on the chalk on that, or different coloured fabrics, and that's great. Now that's great for being able to draw lines where you're going to sew, particularly when you're starting, or if you're going to sew in a dart, you'll be able to draw your dart in. That's really handy to have. They come in a little packet usually just like that.